Hello, everyone. This was supposed to be a live stream, but it was my first live stream ever, and safe to say I had some technical difficulties. So I recorded what I was going to present anyway, and I'm going to post it on YouTube as close to a live stream as I possibly can. LOL for the win. This is actually a modified presentation that I gave to a group of CEOs last year. I actually gave it to two different groups of CEOs, talking a little bit about AI and how I believe it's actually a generational opportunity for people all over the world. And what's really cool about it is I was revisiting it as I was preparing for this live stream, and I realized that a lot of the stuff that I predicted had already started to happen. And in fact, since then, a bunch of new opportunities are starting to, or I shouldn't say new opportunities, more like those opportunities have come to pass, and now we're looking into the next logical step, what the opportunities are. I'm going to share what I would share if I was sharing with those CEOs again. I'll share with them. I'm going to share that with you now. A quick note, as you always have to do for these types of presentations, obviously I'm just some random guy on the internet spouting out a bunch of stuff. So like whatever you see, go and do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and then put it into practice if you want to. Don't just take my word for it. It's sad that we have to say that these days, but that is what it is. Here's what we're going to go through a little bit today. I'm going to go through the Blue Link internet ecosystem, how things worked way back then, a few years ago, age of AI ecosystems, what this means, and probably most importantly, how you can leverage it to create wealth for yourself, your business, your family, and the legacy that you want to leave when you pass on. Let me talk a little bit about the Blue Link internet ecosystem. I used to think of this as the world indexer, which you would call Google, but there's lots of other search engines out there. But effectively, Google was the big one there, the big monster in the room. So world indexer, what did it do? It crawled web pages, so crawled knowledge that had been created by other people, and was very, very effective and efficient at serving that up to people who were looking for knowledge. So knowledge seekers. So you would go on to a Google search, you'd be a knowledge seeker, and Google was and is incredibly effective at connecting you to exactly the knowledge that you needed to answer your question. Now, I know that it didn't always get it right. It certainly had some errors, but when you think about the vast amount of information and the speed at which it delivered answers, it's incredibly effective at what it did. So it's the world indexer. And out of that, an entire ecosystem was developed. So we had our knowledge seekers looking for information, and that being provided by knowledge creators. And then there was a whole bunch of monetary transactions that would happen. Big one, Google search monetization, where they did their ads, and whatever you might think of for ads, that made Google free. And that's really, really powerful. And there's no harm in companies making money by doing that at all, I don't believe. Then we had our knowledge creators were incentivized then to create money, because when their knowledge was at the top of the Google search rankings, they would attract traffic and they could get money from ads themselves, or they could be selling a product or a service in there. So they would win the traffic game, and that would allow them to create new knowledge all the time, which was really, really good. And they'd also be able to get money from the knowledge seekers themselves. I used to do a lot of SEO writing in the cybersecurity industry, and it's hugely effective when you win that search game. It's really powerful. And so that was really, really effective from a knowledge sharing perspective. The challenge that resulted in, though, was that creating a new product or service in general meant that you had to come up with a plan on paper, maybe a spreadsheet. You'll then use the world indexer to figure out each step. So if you think about when you used to have to build a business plan, you have to develop a marketing plan, you'd have to figure out what your product or service was going to be. It's a huge amount of work. And every time that you needed to do that, you'd have to go through some random, infinity list of blue links. 50% of those blue links would be listicles or just random SEO stuff that didn't actually add any value to you. And so there'd be a huge amount of work involved in the research. Just doing the research would often take you days. Then you have to go about building it. Typically, people only have skills in certain particular areas. So whatever areas they didn't have skill in, they'd have to go and find other people to do it for them, which would be hugely expensive. And then they'd have to slowly iterate through the product to make it work. And while there's absolutely no harm in the division of labor and getting experts to come in, it did mean that the overall product development life cycle would be quite expensive, quite long, and very tough for individuals to navigate. It kind of meant that they would become stuck, as this cute little guy I've got there demonstrates. This created a whole bunch of barriers to basically doing business. Web developers, paywalls, random courses, need to learn everything. Like, it's just an enormous amount of stuff for people to get through. And in my experience, what that meant in reality was that there was less knowledge being shared, less process optimization, less stuff. But people become so bogged down and trying to get their stuff launched, they would never actually really get to it. The vast majority of people would give up before it was finished. And that's really a shame, because I believe that everyone's created on purpose for a purpose, and we should make the ability for you to share and do what you've been created to do as easy as possible, because that creates more opportunity. So the reality was there was less stuff being shared, and therefore there was less opportunity. That was the Blue Link ecosystem governed by the World Indexer. What we now start to see happen is the age of AI is coming in. And so here we have a totally different way of approaching things. The big change you can see here is that the knowledge seekers and the knowledge creators all interact with the AI. There's a very minimal interaction between knowledge seekers and knowledge creators. Now, yes, I know that the big ones, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, have all, started to link their results in there, but I would argue that the amount of traffic that comes through from there is actually pretty minimal compared to what it was, because there's no real incentive for people to go there. The AI LLMs, when they're working properly, should give you everything that you need. And in fact, that's their biggest benefit. They give you everything that you need. And so that really shifts this relationship here. The other thing that we've seen, particularly in the last 6 to 12 months, is this real push into coding agents, or what people would call agentic AI, which is where AI can now actually build things for you. And again, this is incredibly powerful, and I believe it's a very, very good thing for the future. I could go into a whole presentation about why I think that's so good and how that will radically improve cybersecurity and everything else, but that's not really for this particular thing that I'm talking about today. The point of this is that the age of AI has radically changed the dynamics of that ecosystem, and that has some positives and some negatives, and ultimately creates opportunity for us. If we go back to my original thesis where I was talking about what it means to create a new product or service, in the age of AI, this means that any individual who has access to these LLMs can come up with an idea, research it on AI, and come up with definitely an MVP for a business plan, like really, really quickly. They could then use AI to build that MVP for them. Okay, so they're not governed by having to find developers that they can afford. They don't have to go to some random consultant to spend thousands of dollars getting a business plan done, or spend hundreds of their own hours doing it. And what used to take them weeks and months to build can be done in hours. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of you who are going to watch this, you're going to throw stones at the fact, it's not as good. I would argue that effective innovation is not about getting it perfect. It's actually about getting stuff out there rapidly and iterating on it. Once you have revenue coming in, you can absolutely start to build a perfect product. In fact, there's a whole book written about it. You should read it sometimes, called The Innovators Dilemma. It's a great book. And probably just as importantly, they can automate all of the dumb stuff that they used to have to pay people to do. So I think, it really provides this just gigantic level up in terms of productivity and the ability for people to come up with an idea and execute it rapidly. What this means in practice is that we have very fast product cycles, right? Like, I can build a web app now in a few days where it used to take me 6 to 8 weeks. Every business can have custom systems, and that's incredibly powerful. Even you as a solopreneur with very little effort these days can build custom processes that 100% leverage your expertise in the way that you've designed them to get the best outcome. You're not locked into these big monolithic processes that are incredibly cumbersome and just not fast and agile at all. This also shifts the process and experience expertise value, right? Like, now, instead of, having to have like a good developer to get stuff done, or a good this or a good that, the biggest success measure will be your ability to process and to develop effective processes and use your experience expertise to make things happen, right? So your ability to ideate a different way of doing things, see how it could be done, and implement that straight away is suddenly paramount, because you don't have all of these random blockages to get to where you want to go. And the other thing is, it's like way harder to hide screw ups in the data. Like AI is phenomenal about processing large amounts of data and being like, this doesn't make sense. And you might think that that's pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised, particularly as you get into larger corporations and larger businesses, how much fat there can be that can be easily trimmed by AI. I like to think of it, my big quote for this is that suddenly the greatest barrier to success is simply your ability to ideate and demonstrate. Like if you can come up with an idea and demonstrate that it works, which you can do all through AI really, really quickly, mate, you've got an incredible business out there. And I believe it'll take a few years for those business models to be cemented and landed on. So there's a massive opportunity for you to get out there. And that's actually the reason why I created the Expert Revolution channel, because I just feel like now is the time to be getting into it. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses. There's definitely some challenges out there, and I do want to acknowledge those at all. So there's massive disruption to the knowledge creation ecosystem, right? Where before the World Indexer used to incentivize knowledge creation and create clear pathways for knowledge seekers to pay knowledge creators, like that entire multi-billion, multi-$100 billion industry, maybe even multi-trillion dollars if we look at the global impact of it, has been hugely disrupted by AI basically inserting itself in the middle of this relationship. And I don't believe that there's an effective business model out there that really replaces that incentivization model effectively. And that's actually like something that just has to be acknowledged. It is an opportunity because whoever does nail that is, going to grow like crazy. But right now we're in the midst of the disruption. We haven't landed on the new business models just yet. It also means that our understanding of how we would use a search or search equivalent like AI, sorry, that's probably not quite accurate. I don't mean search equivalent as it does the same thing, but whereas you used to go to Google and do something, now you go to an AI and do something. It really shifts. Before, your world indexer actually didn't have a lot of say in the accuracy of stuff. Like they would algorithmically assess it and they would aim to serve the most accurate links. But they could really rely on a lot of that social proof. Like if someone would go to that page and bounce off it straight away, or there would be hundreds of signals that would show that that information wasn't accurate, as long as the algorithm could pick that up, they could de-rank that page and re-rank something that was more accurate. So there was this like built-in accuracy mechanism for it. In an LLM, that process is actually quite different, because if you think about it, if you go to your Claude or your ChatGPT or your Gemini and say, how do I get a recipe for this thing? It just gives you the recipe and the steps. All right, there's no real feedback for it unless you say this is wrong, which you're probably not going to do, and go away. Now, I just want to say here, I'm not by any means a legal expert, nor am I pro or against legally making this happen, right? That's a discussion that I just don't feel qualified to inject myself into. What I will say is that accuracy problem is actually far more of a business problem than it is going to be a legal problem. LLMs, as they become more and more entrenched as the go-to place for people to do research, do their thing, to build stuff, will be judged on how accurately and well they do what they need to do. Right? If you go to a coding agent and it builds something that is wrong, and you go to another coding agent and you build something and it works, then you're going to stick with the one that works. The same thing if you ask it how to do something. So whichever LLM nails accuracy all the time consistently will probably win the AI race, I believe. I could be wrong. Okay. But also, AIs need to figure out a way to incentivize that knowledge creation. There's no way, I believe, that any of the large language models can take on the burden of producing all of this new knowledge that happens all around the world all of the time. It's just not feasible. So they need to create a way to incentivize people, hopefully algorithmically, to create this knowledge. It's a little bit I think it's a little bit like how when we had Yahoo before Google came along, and Yahoo used to go through and get humans to verify, different pages and that sort of stuff. Maybe they initially had a higher degree of accuracy. I don't know. I didn't really use the internet back then. But Google certainly made it far, far, far more efficient and far faster. So the other thing is that AIs now need to compensate contributors. Yes, at the moment, there's a fair bit out there about how they don't. And I'm can't really comment on that. You know, I feel that what we're going to see happen though is as these AIs become more and more entrenched and become more and more of the go-to, regardless of what happens with the legislation, in order for them to maintain their cutting edge knowledge creation and being the best at any given task, which is how they make their money, they're going to have to figure out how to compensate people for contributing to them. It's like, in my opinion, it's inevitable. Like there will come a tipping point where people just won't create new stuff for them. And whichever AI figures out how to compensate contributors will 100% win the AI race. The other thing that AIs need to do is they must constantly build faster and better. Because they've now accepted that burden of responsibility of being accurate, incentivizing knowledge, building stuff, they must do it faster and better, because whichever one does wins the race, because ultimately they themselves need to make a profit. In my opinion, this is actually the beauty of capitalism at work, right? Like AI is a massive productivity improvement globally. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the case. But it means that people and AIs have to find a way to make profit themselves from it, and AIs need to make a profit themselves to run. We cannot afford for this to become something that is a government-run service, because the capitalist model will work most effectively when these things are given permission to run well and run effectively. Not without guardrails, but we need to make sure that we clear that these things will become a business problem long before they become a legal problem. So here's my prediction. Again, I'm just a random guy on the internet, so, think what you want to think. That's cool. I'm good with whatever it is. My prediction is that those who build a reputation for the most accurate knowledge and the most effective processes will win the future. And I'm not just talking about the large language models and AIs here. I'm talking about people. Like there is a fundamental shift happening. If you accept my hypothesis that AIs will have to start compensating creators and they will have to start compensating the subject matter experts in a given domain of knowledge, if you become that expert now, then when that tipping point arrives, you are going to slot straight into that and you are going to win big, like huge, I believe, and you will be able to create an entire mini ecosystem out of it. Okay, so what will happen is, I believe, if you do this, you'll be compensated by AI companies, which is great. Always good to get paid by people, particularly if it's something that you love doing and you enjoy doing. You're also going to win the bulk of the traffic that comes out of this. And finally, you're going to create, like for the really big businesses that win really, really big, they're going to create their own mini systems of excellence. And that is going to be an incredibly powerful moment. What do I mean by that? You can imagine that as this ecosystem starts to take place, there is going to become a new way to create and consume knowledge, right? It's going to be going through these LLMs. They're going to start figuring out a way to compensate that. Maybe it's through ad traffic, maybe it's a different way. I'm not really sure about what that is yet. What I am sure about is that there will then be a competitive space that you can win right now that allows you to basically, because let's say it's given domain of knowledge, suddenly there's billions of dollars getting funneled into it for whatever reason. Maybe it's a new thing that's come along, right? There is going to be competition to win that space. But AIs are only going to go with the most effective solution, because that then incentivizes people to keep using their AI. If you're that person and you're that person now, it's incredibly difficult for someone to knock you off that perch, because you're going to have all of the money, all of the resources flowing in, and you will build an entire ecosystem to make sure that you maintain your position at the top, or else the competitors are going to come along and knock you off, right? Like that is the capitalist model. So that means that if you can get in there now, then by the time this tipping point arrives, which I don't think is that far away, you're going to be in an amazing place. And that's kind of like my hypothesis behind what I've started to do. The best place to start then, if you're looking at this, like, oh yes, let's get involved. I want to get into this. Let's make billions. I mean, sure, that's good. And I agree with that. But the best place to start, if you're wondering, is starting with your expertise, right? Your expertise, by definition, is proven and demonstrable. It doesn't matter what field you're in, whether you're a plumber, whether you're a digital creator, whether you're a coder, a programmer, a cybersecurity expert, it actually doesn't matter. If you have subject matter expertise in an area, your time is now to start proving it and to start getting it online. demonstrating that it works. Because when you do, you're going to start winning that social proof game, and that will lead you to being one of the people that the AI companies will tap on the shoulder and say, hey, we need some help getting expert content. Can you help us? It also means that you're going to start building an audience for yourself that will allow people to experience what you're creating for them and do well out of it, which will incentivize them to start paying you. So you're also going to start winning that traffic game. And like I said before, if you do this well, I really believe that we have a short window of opportunity to win and win big. You might be wondering how you go about getting started with this. And I talk about this a fair bit in my course, but I'm going to say it here because I think these principles are actually really valid for everybody to work with. Number one is you have to start by recognizing that your expertise is valuable. I think that's actually one of the biggest barriers I've seen with the people that I've helped over the years. They just don't believe in themselves, and that's a real shame. I can remember a friend of mine who I sat down with who's like an amazing performance athlete, still has a day job, but just loves doing it in the background. And I talked to him and I'm amazed at the insights that he has, but his comment to me was, I'm not sure if what I've got is valuable. I mean, to me, that is totally nuts, right? Like you have so much value. It's actually very reflective of my own journey when I started Tradeoxy and all the rest of it. Like I feel like the biggest barrier for the majority of people is really shifting their identity to realize that who they are and the expertise that they have is incredibly valuable. The second thing is once you realize that it's valuable, you've actually got to get out there and start showing it. And you've got to build a social profile demonstrating what you do. And when I talk about this idea or this concept that I kind of had, this vision, I guess for the future, might become a vision if it turns out to be real, or maybe I'll just, be some random guy on the internet who gets it wrong. But my whole genesis for the YouTube launch system and all of the other courses that I'm starting to create has been, once you know that your stuff is valuable, once you know that your expertise is valuable, the next thing you have to do is start building a social profile that demonstrates what you do. Right, it's one thing to know internally that you're valuable, and that's very good from a self-esteem and identity perspective. Right. It's a totally different thing to start demonstrating what you do to other people. And that's where you need a structured way to take that information out of your head, convert it into things that can be shared with people, and then start sharing it. And the third thing that you need to do that I think a lot of people miss is you've got to start creating resources that will help people. Like that to me is the biggest win, right? Like listening to a YouTube video is one thing, but really starting to take that into the next level, which is showing people how they too can use these systems in their own lives. Like that's the next step. And that to me is probably the biggest win of all of them. And then, assuming that goes right, and my prediction is accurate, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be right, then you reinvest your profits and you build the ecosystem. And hopefully that gets you to the top of the funnel. And that gives you the ability to create the future and the wealth and the legacy that you see for yourself and your family. If you've got any questions, absolutely drop them in the comments. Like I'm super passionate about this. Like I said, this is a presentation I've given to many different groups of people over the last 6 to 12 months, CEOs, business leaders, decision makers, and now I'm starting to give it to the people that are taking my YouTube launch system course. I just feel that this is your opportunity. This is your moment. This is your time. If you're watching this video, I just feel that this is your metaphorical tap on the shoulder to say, hey, this is your moment. What you have matters. Who you are matters. And you should be out there sharing it. That's all from me. Hopefully next week my live stream goes well. I'll see you there.